What restrictions should a democratic government be allowed to place on our constitutional freedoms in the name of safety? Many of us assume this document, the U.S. Constitution, acts as a rigid, definitive shield protecting our personal liberties. But there is a massive logistical problem. The framers wrote a brief text centuries ago, leaving it entirely silent on modern technological or medical scenarios. To figure out how our rights actually function today, we have to examine how the Supreme Court treats explicit rights written in ink versus implied rights hidden in the shadows. Resolving this puzzle of text versus interpretation is the only way to understand why the government is allowed to control our most fiercely debated modern freedoms. Look closely at the text of the Second Amendment. It is a confusing example of an explicit right due to its historical phrasing. Does the text protect a state's need to form a militia, or guarantee an individual's right to own a weapon? In 2008, the Supreme Court ruled on this exact issue in District of Columbia v. Heller. They officially confirmed the text protects an individual's right to possess a firearm for self-defense inside the home. Yet, this constitutional guarantee regularly collides with the physical reality of gun violence and heavy public demand for safety regulations. Even the Heller decision noted that the right to bear arms is not unlimited. A government can legally compromise an explicit right by restricting felons from buying guns or mandating background checks to maintain public safety. Now, look at the opposite end of the spectrum, a fundamental freedom that is completely absent from the text of the Constitution, the right to privacy. As this diagram illustrates, in the 1960s case Griswold v. Connecticut, the Supreme Court layered the First, Third, Fourth, Fifth, and Ninth Amendments. They used these overlapping protections to construct a judicial zone of privacy. This newly defined, unwritten zone was first used to legally protect the rights of married couples to access contraception without state interference. A few years later, this same implied privacy right became the foundation for the 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling regarding reproductive bodily autonomy. The court attempted to balance a woman's implied right to the privacy of her body against the state's interest in protecting potential life, a decision that caused intense societal friction. Because implied rights lack explicit textual backing, they create a fragile legal foundation. They remain constantly subject to intense public debate and shifting judicial review. In the 21st century, our implied right to privacy directly collides with an era of mass digital information gathering. The September 11th terrorist attacks drastically shifted the government's priority away from individual privacy toward extreme national security. Through legislation like the USA Patriot Act, signed into law during the Bush administration, and secretive FISA courts, federal surveillance powers vastly expanded. These laws bypass traditional limits. The government can secretly tap phone lines, monitor internet communications, and delay search warrants indefinitely. As technology outpaces what the framers could have imagined, citizens are forced to question exactly how much of their unwritten privacy they must surrender to achieve modern security. Whether a freedom is explicitly written in ink or implied through judicial interpretation, absolutely no constitutional right is absolute. The framers drafted a rigid historical document, but we live in a dynamic reality, fighting modern crime, medical crises, and global terrorism. Because of this dynamic reality, American society must perpetually renegotiate its social contract. We are constantly balancing individual liberty against the government's duty to protect us. The Supreme Court serves as the active umpire in this ongoing negotiation, adapting the rules as society evolves and technologies advance. Constitutional freedom requires constant civic vigilance. Each generation must decide the acceptable price they are willing to pay for safety.